This is a teaching of Hebrew Shalom Ministries.
The Alef Bet, 1. The letter Aleph.
Shalom, shalom. Welcome to part 1 of the Hebrew Alef Bet. The first letter of the Hebrew alphabet is the letter Aleph.
This is what the Hebrew letter Aleph looks like.
If I were to draw the letter Aleph, it would look something like this. I would draw a vertical line at an angle, followed by two curved lines, one just below the center going off this way, and then the other one just above the center of the vertical line going down this way. And that's how you would draw the letter Aleph. There are several aspects to each Hebrew letter. So let's start with the first one, which is sound, the sound of the letter. The first aspect of Hebrew letters is the sound of the letter. Each letter has its own distinct sound. The sound of the letter Aleph is silent. You may have heard that in ancient Hebrew there were no vowels, which is actually a half-truth. There were vowels, it's just that there wasn't a system for written vowels until later. There were vowels in the ancient Hebrew, but there were no written vowels. Because of this, Aleph is sometimes called a vowel carrier, meaning that it takes upon it the sound of the vowel attached to it. In this picture, I added a vowel to the letter Aleph. It's the horizontal line underneath of it, and it has the sound ah, as in the word Abba. So when reading Hebrew without the vowel symbols, one would see the Aleph and know that almost every single time it's going to be a vowel carrier that's carrying a certain vowel sound associated with it. A second aspect to Hebrew letters is the numerical value. Every single Hebrew letter has a numerical value associated with it. The second aspect of Hebrew letters is that each letter has a number associated with it. The letter Aleph is the first letter, and its numerical value is 1. In English, the letter 1 can be written two different ways. It can be written out as a word, or we can use the symbol for the number 1. In Hebrew, there's also two ways to write out a number. It can be written out as a word, or it can be written out as a symbol. But in the case of Hebrew, the symbol is the letter. The number 1 in Hebrew as a word is echad. But the number 1 in Hebrew when written as a symbol is actually the letter Aleph. The letter Aleph is both a letter and a number. Every Hebrew letter and every Hebrew word has a numerical value. The Hebrew language is very deep. One of the comparisons made is to the periodic table in chemistry.
For example, if I would write H2O, one would understand that that means water. In the case of H2O, one can break it down into 2 hydrogen and 1 oxygen, or one can combine it with other elements to make up new substances. Hebrew works in a similar way. The Hebrew letter Aleph is a letter, but it is also the number 1 and has a numerical value of 1.
The Hebrew letters are used to number the Hebrew verses in the Hebrew scriptures. Here's an example of Genesis 1:1. Notice the little Aleph on the right top hand corner there, offset to note verse number 1. Also, the picture of this verse is good practice. See if you can pick out the letter Aleph as it occurs several times in this verse. A third aspect of Hebrew letters is that each Hebrew letter is also a Hebrew word. Each Hebrew letter is also a Hebrew word. The Aleph is the word oxen. The Aleph is the word oxen. An example of this is found in Psalms 8:7. All the sheep and oxen, yea, and all the beasts of the field. The word oxen in this verse is the letter and the word Aleph. Which takes me into the fourth aspect of Hebrew letters, which is the shape or the picture of the letter. sometimes called a pictograph. The Hebrew language, as I was saying earlier, like the periodic table and the elements, it's a multitasker. The Hebrew language has layers of meaning, depths of meaning that are all true at the same time.
Here I've included a picture of the ancient, also known as the Paleo-Hebrew, pictograph of the letter Aleph. The picture is the picture of an ox head, an oxen, the same as the Hebrew word Aleph. Paleo-Hebrew is no longer used. It's found in ancient Hebrew that archaeologists dig up. For about 2,500 years now, the modern Hebrew script has been used. The Paleo-Hebrew simply means the ancient Hebrew.
In my teaching, I will use the modern Hebrew, the shape letter, like I showed you at the beginning of the video here in the picture. This is how the modern Hebrew looks. In one of the counterintuitive details about the Hebrew, the modern Hebrew is actually the real ancient Hebrew. The Hebrew that Adam and Eve had was the modern Hebrew, which was replaced by the Paleo-Hebrew for a season, and then restored again in the time of Daniel. The Paleo-Hebrew and the modern Hebrew, and the history of all of that is a subject for another teaching video. I just mentioned it here. The Paleo-Hebrew looks mainly at the picture, whereas the modern Hebrew looks mainly at the shape of the Hebrew letter. One of the principles to learn about Hebrew is that Hebrew emphasizes function more than it does shape. In other words, the action is emphasized more than just the shape of the object. This is because Hebrew is a living language, not just an object to be studied, but actually a living language. And because of this, each of the Hebrew letters has a meaning of a word that was part of everyday life. So an ox is a living animal, and an ox has different aspects or functions to it. So when looking at the meaning of an aleph, an oxen is strong, for example. Oxen are also used to train other oxen. They attach a yoke to both of them, and the older oxen trains and teaches the younger oxen. This is why you may hear pictographs, the pictures of the Hebrew letters, interpreted to mean several things. As the old saying goes, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So there's a whole lot of concepts that are contained in a picture of an ox. And likewise, the shape of the Hebrew letter contains many messages or aspects, ways it can be interpreted. Shalom, shalom. This ends part one, the lesson on the Hebrew letter Aleph. In part two, we will pick up with the second Hebrew letter, which is the Hebrew letter Bet. But before I conclude here, I'd like to leave you with one example of a pictographic meaning. Remember that Hebrew goes from right to left. We haven't learned the mem and the nun yet, but the Hebrew word amen is Aleph, Mem, Nun. It's 3 Hebrew letters, and each one of those 3 Hebrew letters has a pictographic meaning. The Aleph is the ox, which stands for strength. The Mem is water, and the Nun is the seed. So when one puts it together, the word amen in Hebrew means strong water for the seed. So when we say amen, we're putting strong water on the seed. I hope that you're enjoying this teaching from Hebrew Shalom Ministries. I hope you're able to join me for the other teachings as well and learn the entire Hebrew alphabet. Shalom, shalom, lehitraot.